often I like to remind my clients that they're not broken, they're perfectly whole, and they simply just need that reminder that they're buried beneath layers of limiting beliefs. And so
Welcome
that's
to this week's episode of Leadership Sounds and Bites with Michele. I'm like stumbling over my own name, right? Michele, that's who I am. Special guest this week, super excited, Sabrina Johnson. And so we're kind of exchanging because I was just recently on Sabrina's podcast, which is cool. So we get to continue a conversation. Sabrina is, and I have a lot of, I'm envious around this. She's a hypnotherapist. So I did get certified in that. I don't practice like you do. So I'm looking up to you going, oh my God, this is so freaking cool. As well as a mindset mentor. And so I'm excited to be in the room with you today. And hopefully everyone listening is as well. So you have a quote to kick us off and something that you said that you share with clients. And so we can do that and get to chatting.
Yes, absolutely. But first, before I say the quote, I just want to thank you, Michele, as well. It's an honor to be here with you, and I'm just as equally impressed and excited about you as you are me. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for that. So the Mutual Admiration Society, and what's really cool is and I'll back up a minute because we met through Sphere, and he pulled all of us together in this community, and I've just been really blessed to meet some really cool humans, and the work that you're doing. So I think that's what we all have in common as well. So back to you.
Absolutely. Yes. So often I like to remind my clients that they're not broken, they're perfectly whole, and they simply just need that reminder that they're buried beneath layers of limiting beliefs. And so that's the quote that I actually was bringing to you today.
Thank you. And it's interesting because you and I chatted before we hit record, and discovered that we too have our own limiting beliefs.
Yes, we do.
And maybe we're not as buried as other people, but what do you find when you share that with clients? Is there a reaction? I mean, I'm assuming there's got some meaning for you behind that as well, that reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try to remind my clients as well that we're all human and we all have these limiting beliefs. It's just may look a little bit differently because I may be, and I'm going to put this in air quotes because I don't know this to be fact, but I may be a little bit more self-aware than some in that situation. And so it's really important, I think, to remind everybody that we are human. We all have those limits. It's just how we choose to deal with them that separates it or makes it a little bit different.
Yeah. It's interesting when, and I know with me and with clients, I'll plant seeds, right? Because that's
Yeah.
typically what happens in coaching sessions. We plant seeds and the brain goes away and continues to process whatever we planted. And once you start, I don't know if this is the case with you, but once you start seeing things, you can't unsee them. Once
No.
you, once you become aware of stuff, and all of a sudden it's like language that we use or reactions that we have or thoughts that we have that we never really noticed before, that all of a sudden we become aware of them and like, oh my goodness, this happens a lot.
Yep. Those are yeah, we all have those moments because it's ingrained in our brain. We're almost programmed to recognize that. Like, for example, that's a perfect example of people buying a new car and say
Um,
it's the color red, and now all of a sudden they see it everywhere.
or when I remember when I was pregnant with my kids, I looked around and every woman was pregnant. I mean, I was seeing all these pregnant women. I'm like, really? Everyone's pregnant at the same time I am? Or people with grandkids or whatever it may be. So I'm curious because I have my own history with hypnosis, right? And why I stepped into it. Why hypnosis? What meaning did it have? Because that's a very niche kind of thing that we go into. So I'm curious.
It's a really great question. I think a lot of people are curious about that as well. And hypnosis because I had my own experience with hypnosis. And which this is kind of funny because when I went and I experienced hypnosis, it was similar to your experience where I was originally attending so that I could quit smoking.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
And I attended with my mom and my stepdad. But my experience wasn't as pleasant. I actually went and the opposite happened. Nothing worked for me. But
Huh?
what's different about my experience from yours is that my mom and my stepdad both didn't believe it would actually work going into it. So I was predisposed to those beliefs that, this isn't going to be effective. It's not really going to work. We're just going to see, how everybody else responds to it. But it wasn't anything that we took seriously.
Mm,
So because of that, the intention was already set that this isn't going to work. I wasn't as focused as I should have been during that process. So ultimately, the result was it did not work.
interesting.
I was fascinated by that experience because at that time, I was also doing my own research about the mindset, how our subconscious works. I hadn't leaned into choosing hypnotherapy as a profession. But I did know that from some of the results of that seminar, there were several people that ultimately quit smoking. I
Mm-hmm.
happened to be one that didn't. But every experience like that teaches us something. And
Mm-hmm.
so I chose to learn that we all have our own limits. We all have our things that we have to kind of recondition ourselves for because we have been conditioned by society and the
Mm-hmm.
way that we're raised. And so, yeah, that's initially what intrigued me about it.
That's interesting. It's and you in it you used words like I wasn't focused on that or something along that line. And what came to mind for me when you were talking is you weren't open to it.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing because when I go and deal with hypnosis, it's not so much that we it's heavy lift, we have to focus on something. I think we just have to be open to it. But that being said, there is a story that I was told by one of my clients when I was relaying. So I did go to hypnosis back in the late 80s. And one session, 150 people in the room, $39 at the time, and literally stopped smoking. Had no longer was fighting the craving, all that stuff. But the difference is I wanted to stop and I was open to thinking differently, right? I mean, didn't realize what it was, but open to thinking differently. I told a coachee that story. She told me a story of her father that had to go because he worked for this company, and this was back in the day, and they required as part of, I don't know if they were self-insured, whatever. I don't know that that would happen in today's world,
Yeah,
but back
probably.
in the day, they required employees to go. So literally, you've got this very, arms crossed kind of human in the room. And funny is that he actually ended up stopping smoking. And he was
Oh,
only there
wow.
because he had to go.
Yeah, I
So
wasn't expecting that.
yeah, so no, it does work for whatever reason with some people, but I think the big distinction is we just need to be open to something different
Yeah,
and be curious about it. And I think that's the way with most things in life. If I go back to where focus goes, energy flows. If I walk into a situation, I'm looking for all the crap that's going to go wrong. All
yeah,
right. Guess what happens? All the crap that's going to go wrong. And if there's even a good thing that's happening, I'm not going to see it
right.
because I'm focused on all the crap that's going to go wrong. And so I think that's part of it too is can we at least just walk in with curiosity
Yeah.
and with an expectation that maybe it can be different.
Exactly. And I think the thing that I would add to that is that there are individuals who, just by the very nature of their DNA makeup, the way that they've been raised, and the beliefs that they currently have, they are a little bit more susceptible to going into a trance like state than others.
Mhm.
So there's a few different factors that play into being able to be hypnotized, but you
Mhm.
definitely hit the nail on the head of one of them. um, there's a test that we can actually do to see how susceptible to hypnotherapy you are just by
Mhm.
a simple eye roll, essentially. The further you tilt your head back, depending on the direction of your eyes, and it's kind of hard for me to do it here.
Yeah.
I can pay attention to the direction of your eyes and where they go when you kind of close your lids, not
Mm-hmm.
fully, but partially, to see how susceptible you are. And that's one of the tests that we can tell. It doesn't always work. It's not like a, 100% effective.
Yeah.
That can tell you.
I
Isn't
think
that
the
interesting?
word indicator comes to mind.
Yeah.
It was funny because I remember the one I went through was Paul McKenna. And I know you talked about, I think you do RTT, which is rapid
Rapid
transform.
transformational
Yeah.
therapy.
With it's Marissa Pierce. Is that who it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, another Mind Valley one. So Paul McKenna was talking about stories, and he's like, and I think a lot of it too, Sabrina, when you and I are talking, is for people not to be afraid of this, right? It may seem woo-woo and everything else, but there's science behind this stuff, which is the exciting part. But Paul McKenna was talking, he said, we go into trance all the time. We just don't call it that. For
Right.
instance, and not everyone does it, but it's like when I would commute back and forth to work, there are plenty of days that I would arrive at home and I could not tell you the turn by turn thing that I did, right? I'm in a trance. If we go into situations to where we have no sense of time anymore, that we're reading a book or we're engrossed in something, we're literally in a trance. We're focused on something to the exclusion of all else. And when
Yeah.
we go into those spaces that we do, we could be working on a project. But literally we blocked everything else out. We're in a trance. I think people do it in restaurants when
Yeah.
you've got a group of people that are talking together in this hub, noisy freaking restaurant, and you hear nothing around you. You're focused on the conversation at the table, and at some point in the evening, you look up and realize you're the last table in the restaurant. Okay, you're in a trance. You've created this bubble trance-like state, and so I say that because it happens all the time.
All the time. And those are just a few examples.
Yeah.
When you're daydreaming, you're in a trance. It's just
Yes.
like that.
Well, and you're your most creative in those moments. I think that's where it's like
Yeah.
going into, is it theta state? I think it's alpha, theta,
Yeah,
at
it's
different levels. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's in between the theta and beta state at that point.
So, and that's when we're super creative. We tap into all different parts of our brain that we can do additional stuff. And I think it's that stage. But it's like it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing to tap into because as leaders or humans, we tend to go from thing to thing to thing.
Yeah.
We're a lot of times stressed, worried, telling ourselves we're late, right? And
Mhm.
so we arrive at this thing and we've already got this baggage of I'm behind. I'm falling behind. I'm not on time. And when we carry all that with us, we're not at our best.
Nope, not at all. And that's honestly, that's where rapid transformational therapy can help to get over some of those types of issues. And RTT, it sounds like kind of a scary language to use, but all RTT really is an accelerated approach of getting to your subconscious. And it's a combination essentially of NLP dialogue and hypnosis techniques.
So
So
NLP
you're,
is
yeah,
neuro
neuro
linguistic
linguistic
programming. Yes.
programming. Yep. So it's a combination of RTT and hypnotherapy techniques with a little bit of psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, to be able to identify those limiting beliefs, traumas, the issues holding you back, so that we can create a rapid dialogue to reach your subconscious. I
Hmm.
hope I explained that well enough. It's kind of confusing to go into detail on,
Well, it's
but
almost like I'm gonna give you a different animal. Okay. It's almost like if I look at a Word document or Excel spreadsheet and I do a find and replace.
yeah.
So, so I'm going
Pretty
to take
much.
all this negative dialogue, this narrative, right? And we're going to replace it with positive dialogue, other stuff that's reaffirming, empowering, whatever it may be. And the same thing happens with others like and what I loved when I went through it, okay, and I this is I think reassuring for people. And
Mhm.
it was interesting for me is the subconscious, which controls so much of what we do and the experiences we have in life has a couple main jobs, and one is to keep us safe.
Yep.
and to use the least amount of energy, which is why humans are just so freaking resistant to change, is because it takes energy to change. So
Yeah,
if you think about it keeping us safe, misguided as it is, okay, because Paul McKenna was talking, he goes, the subconscious isn't logical, it's
right.
purposeful. And so
Yeah,
here's
your
where that
fight or
shows
flight.
up. Yes. So when you look at like self-sabotaging behavior, smoking, drinking, drugs, whatever that may be, biting your nails, whatever that stuff is that you're self-sabotaging, it's subconscious, okay? And the
Yeah,
subconscious is trying to keep us safe through these self-sabotaging behaviors. And you're like, what?
it's so ironic. I know
What?
it.
But the thing is, it's serving a purpose.
It
So
is.
there's something that was happening in your life that is the thing that became the thing to get you out of that negative thing, that stress mode, whatever it may be. And this is where it kind of makes sense. So what we have to do is do a find and replace. So acknowledge, great job, subconscious, for keeping me safe and doing this stuff. Let's find another way to do that.
Yes.
Only we don't have to find the way. What would you add?
I was just going to say your example actually reminds me of when people who do have an addiction to some smoking with chewing gum or sucking on candy like
Yes.
suckers. And so then you see that after they quit smoking, they've now adapted this new behavior or habit to
Yeah.
supplement for that smoking habit. And
Right.
so, yeah, it just made me think of that when you were
Yeah.
explaining that.
Well, and it's interesting because when we went through, we'll stick to smoking for a minute because I did smoke for 12 and a half years, and that's where I went through hypnotherapy, and yes, it did work because I did want to stop.
Right.
Um, I don't remember anything about the actual hypnosis,
Mm.
nothing. Don't remember what he said, nothing other than the fact that it worked.
Yeah.
But when I go back, there is language in my head that I remember because I remember I do remember this point that was made is you're not quitting because quitting it's almost like stopping at a stop sign and then you can go again.
Yeah.
You're stopping. And so it was this very clear definition that he gave around you're stopping smoking, you're not quitting what you've done before because when you quit, you can pick it back up again. And
Yes.
so it was this thing in my head that it's like, I stopped smoking. And when you stop, you don't go back. And it
That
was interesting, very clear language around that. Um, but
when you're talking hypnotherapy for habits and getting rid of those habits, that's exactly what you have to be is precise and very intentional and careful with the language that you replace that dialogue with.
mhm,
Because as you were saying, it's easy to pick it right back up again if it isn't. And
mhm,
that's what's interesting about the subconscious is it has to be that specific intentional language that it adapts and gets replaced with.
mhm. But the beauty of it, it's instantaneous. And I want to connect that to, which is where at current state, I don't practice hypnotherapy with clients. I do want to and start practicing that because I went through all of it and I find it so helpful for people, fascinating and helpful. Fascinating is self-serving for me, helpful is the part for everyone else. Um, but when you take what we're talking about and then you also apply it to leadership and stepping in to improve leadership or being a more effective leader or change the words that you use of how you show up or describe to people or engage with people, it's all the
Yeah.
same stuff. It's all the same stuff. And so
It,
that's the part that really excites me is that it's about changing language, the nuances to it, right? One
yeah.
of the things I found is I would be in conversation with them and they would say things like, when they're talking about performance of an employee, they would talk to the employee and say, basically, John, I need you to do this. It's a performance conversation. And so here's the thing when you're telling John, you need John to do this, John's subconscious is not going to own that as a task for John
Yeah.
because John, that what it's going to land as is, oh, I'm doing her a favor. And
Yeah.
so it may not get done.
Right.
So, one of the things, the language part of it that's so important and we'll bridge from hypnotherapy to, talking the subconscious to
Mhm.
leadership, is to let John know, John, these are the expectations of this role. And as part of being successful in this role, this is what needs to be done. But it's not a personal favor. And I'm not going to say those words at home. But when we use language like, I need you to do this, that's how it lands. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I agree with that. And actually, this is the very reason why they started using neuro linguistic programming in business, is to incorporate a better dialogue for those entrance conversations.
Hmm.
Because NLP is essentially the study of how our brains process information and how that impacts our behavior plus our communication.
Hmm.
So it can be really powerful to understanding and changing our thought patterns and
Hmm.
our feelings and actions towards those thought patterns, if I explain that right.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree, because we're dealing with, whether you're at work or you're at home or you're doing whatever you may be doing, we're the same human, and
Yes.
humans have similar, we're wired similarly as far as built. I'm not talking personality types or anything else. But it's cool to understand that stuff. And then we've got more control. We can step in, not that we're controlling others, but we've got more control about how we're feeling, how engagements we have, how we're connecting with other, humans and what they're hearing.
Yeah.
And it's just more freeing. When I look at it and go, okay, I don't need you to do this. You need you to do this. It's people who care deeply about other people aren't stepping in thinking, I'm telling them what to do. No, you're not.
Right.
You're sharing the expectations of the role. And it's a different conversation. And I find it's easier for leaders to have.
I completely agree with that. I don't think there's really anything more to say about it.
Oh, there you go. Our job here is done. What is one of
Great.
your most, if you look back on it, Sabrina, because I know you and I have done hot seat coaching together. When you look back on the clients that you've had, or the work that you've done, what are some one or two things that stand out for you that you're like, this is what kept me going, or this is why I do what I do?
That's such a great question. I love that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. So, I have one client specifically who has a lot of trauma.
Mm.
And traditionally, they did try therapy, and therapy was not working for them because they had, again, all of these limiting beliefs going into therapy. And so automatically therapy was not going to be a good option just because they believed it was not effective. Their entire family actually believed that counseling and therapy was not effective.
Oh.
So, my entrance into even helping this individual was just saying, how about we do just a few breathing exercises? I'll give you these breathing exercises to do at home, which they are breathing exercises that I do before every hypnosis session that I have, because it
Hmm.
does help individuals to relax and get
Hmm.
into that state.
Hmm.
And so I gave them these exercises to do whenever they felt a panic attack coming on.
Hmm.
And so they did. And they were like, oh my gosh, that helped me already so much. I would like to learn a little bit more about what you do and how you think you can help me.
Hmm.
And so for this individual, I wasn't automatically going to jump into let's try hypnosis.
Yeah.
Instead, I was going to assign them some meditative guided hypnosis that they could do at home on their own.
Mm.
So rather than me taking them through that session and them feeling that pressure of, is this or is this not going to work?
Hmm.
I did a recording for them and then sent it to them to listen to when they started to get in that space of being stressed and panicked.
Hmm.
And so they did that for the next week. And I was nervous because I hadn't heard from them. I think about 2 to 3 weeks went by. I hadn't heard
Oh,
any,
wow. And
nothing.
by the way, people, that is nerve-wracking for a coach or someone who's helping you. It's like,
Yes.
is it going okay? How's
Right.
everything? Yeah.
And you walk that balance. Well, should I check in? Should
Yeah.
I not? I did say that I would let them experience this and
Yeah.
then reach out when they needed me. So that's what I did. Thankfully, I think it ended up being about 3 weeks. They reached out and they were like, oh my gosh, this has made such a big difference. I don't feel that I need to go see a counselor now. You have changed my whole entire perspective on therapy, which is like, thank you. That's exactly what
Yeah.
I hear, because I'm just giving you the tools to
Mm-hmm.
you to overcome a challenging situation. And that's all I
Mm-hmm.
do. I'm not
Yeah.
pressuring anything.
Yeah.
So that is one of those experiences where it's like, I'm able to change your life in some way, shape, or form. Yes, please. Let's keep going.
Oh, I love that. Did they actually end up coming in and do a session?
Yes, they
Oh
did.
my God, I love that.
Yeah. And it
So,
was an in-person session, which is always so much more gratifying for me.
oh, it's a gift
It
when you're
is.
able to meet in person, especially with that. Yeah. I love that example because what you're talking about is establishing trust, and especially someone who's been through trauma. I'm sure there
Yeah.
may have been trust that was broken, at some level. And so that's a really cool thing to kind of dip the toe in the water and walk people through. And it's so gratifying. And like it fills my heart when we're able to, allow humans to lead better lives. That's awesome. I love it.
Oh, thank you. And
Yeah, is there
I
another
just
example that you have, or do you want to?
I just wanted to mention something real quick, because
Yeah,
I do have a lot of examples that I can share, but
yeah.
and you know as well as me that we don't want to give anybody the impression that we're going to share all of their personal information.
Oh, yeah, no, 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 no.
So
Good
I'm
call.
just
Thank
letting
you.
people know that I'm
Yeah,
being very unspecific and careful
yes,
with the way that I'm
yes,
explaining these situations,
yes.
because I'm protecting my
Yeah.
client.
No, I think that's a huge call out. So thanks for that reminder. And it's the same thing with me. If I relay stories, and it's almost like with HIPAA in the healthcare world, we may relay the high level information about the diagnosis or the patient or whatever, but it's not about any details that are going to connect back to who that person is. But
Exactly.
it's more about learning and relatability
Yeah.
that we do it. So it's like, okay, can you see yourself in this scenario and go, you know what, it's close enough that I think that might help me too. So
Yep.
yeah, it's a good call out. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, anything else you'd like to share on this? Because I find it incredibly interesting and I hope and I would love people because people listening may have their own challenges as they walk through stuff and they may have wondered about it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for people to get some answers to questions maybe they haven't formed yet.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I did want to give another example just
Yeah.
because I feel like this example is extremely common.
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody more recently that came to me with problems with their position in their career.
Mm-hmm.
They've really trying to advance and grow and get to that next level, and they just feel stuck. They feel like they're in a period of stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I see so commonly. And so we did do hypnotherapy to overcome some of those limiting beliefs surrounding um, what a lot of people consider their executive presence.
Mm.
And I say this in air quotes because your executive presence is going to look different by definition than my executive presence does. And so you can't, we can only assume what their ideal image of executive presence is. And so I did have her clearly define what hers was. Um, and so we did, go through a couple of sessions to make sure that we were getting to the bottom of that. I don't know how else I can really explain this situation. I wasn't kind of
No, it's
prepared for
it's
that,
funny,
but
Sabrina, you say that, and I'm going to go back to I had a client one time that talked about, you know, executive presence, and it's actually more than one client when I'm saying these words now, but
Yeah.
talk about executive presence. And there's this definition that people may give it, that it's like this lofty, I don't know, like I have to be exactly, and emulate is probably the better word, emulate the CEO, how they currently are, or, I have to be stern. I can't engage with people. I can't. And I'm like, no, executive presence is about confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, situational awareness, being able to, guide people, provide vision, be present when you're present, as Gina Temple would say, one of the leaders that I've been blessed to know. And Gina's still around, by the way. I don't want to make it sound like she's gone. She's still around. But it's one of those things that when we make it so daunting, like, when I become an executive, I can't laugh anymore.
Right.
Where did that come from? No, you just need to be you. You need to be confident. You need to be respectful. I mean, you're going to have a broader scope of what's going on, but executive presence just stepping in. No, you're not going to be the 100% of your goofy self that you are with your family, but that's
Right.
okay. You're still going to be you. It's part of the authentic part of you. And I think it's a really good call out, is that we do have beliefs, and that stuff will hold us back. Because if you think about, our brain is meant to keep us safe. And if you've got this vision of what somebody can be higher up in the organization, and it's not who you are, then you're going to hold yourself back.
Exactly. And you're never going to measure up to that image because we're all different and we're all unique in our
Mhm.
strength and our
Mhm.
presence.
Yeah. It's kind of like social media, where it's just this curated reality. And so if we're looking at that for, oh, I have to be just like this,
Yeah.
not in your everyday life, you don't. But if for some reason you want to
Definitely
present
not.
that out to social media, here's my best day, makeup on, everything else. Yeah, sure, go. But don't think for a minute that that's someone's 24/7 life, because it's not.
Right. And
So,
that's so
yeah.
important to share.
Yeah, so I agree. Thank you for this time. This has been great. It flew by. I want to be able to do this again
Oh, we're done
sometime.
already?
I know.
Didn't
It's like,
realize
oh my
it.
gosh, where did the time go? So I'm curious, and I would love to know, what are one or two things, Sabrina, that you would love people to walk away with around our topic for today?
Well, honestly, I would just like people to keep an open mind in
Mhm.
when they're thinking about therapy or counseling or hypnosis. Just keep an open mind because you never know what could come out of each application, how it's used, and how it could benefit you.
Mhm.
I mean, we use hypnosis for anxiety, stress, phobias, weight management, smoking, relationship issues, self esteem, chronic pain. The list goes on. Like,
Yeah,
there's so many benefits. And so I just hope that we can eliminate that limiting belief in
yeah,
people's mind.
yeah. No, I love that. I think the other two is, instead of maybe a fear, or it's not going to work, or some people are like, I don't believe in it. My response to that is, it's not a religion. So,
Right.
so I think it's just a matter of, be open to it, get curious about it, right? Wonder, what could it do for me?
Just
Um,
curious.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what I will do is, I will put your contact information. So I'll have you share that with me on how people can get a hold of you. If you're listening and have questions about hypnotherapy, anything that we've talked about, reach out to me, reach out to Sabrina. I'll be more than happy to, address whatever questions or comments. I appreciate this time. So thank you very much. This has been Leadership Soundbites with Michele and Sabrina Johnson. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe.